Good afternoon, this is Team 10. We'll be presenting South Korea for our project. Next slide. So this is our overview. We'll be talking about the demographics, the GDP, labor markets, and then the price levels and Gini index. Data was gathered from 2000 to 2024, which is 24 years of data. South Korea has a landmass of about over 100,000 square kilometers. And then Seoul's capital, obviously, the language spoken is Korean. Next slide. So about 15 to 64% of 15 to 64 years of age is the working age in the country, which accounts for about 34% of the population. This population group is shrinking due to low births. And then the proportions between the male and females are 24 to about 25% um, subsequently. Next slide. So the political system, they exercise a democratic system with executive, legislature, and then judiciary. For the executive, the president has a term limit of 5 years, and then 4 years for both judiciary and legislature. Korea has certain strong institutions that pretty much gathers data that are relevant to our project. You have the FDIC, the KDIC, the Korean Statistical Information Service, and then the Bank of Korea, which exercises jurisdiction over 20 banks, domestic banks, and then 35 foreign banks.
Now, talking about the real and nominal GDP, so as you can see from the trend given in the graph, like overall, there has been a significant growth in the economic expansions overall for South Korea. And specifically, you can see there has been the period of crisis and surge, especially the crisis period of 2008 financial crisis, where it led to a decline minus 0.8%, and there was another crisis during 2019. And there has been a surge period post-pandemic. As you can see, it hit a $1.8 trillion economy, and currently it's projected to do the same. Talking about the GDP per capita, it can be further explained into three segments, not solely on GDP per capita, but Human Development Index and infant mortality rate per 1,000 deaths. All three of them has increased significantly from the starting period of 2000 to 2024, where per capita has been reached to 35,000 and HDI is 0.92 currently. And similarly, IMR is due to the advancement in healthcare, life, education, there has been a significant growth for South Korea.
By December 2024, South Korea's consumer price index was 114.91, an all-time high, highlighting how much the prices of South Korea's basket of goods and services have changed for the Korean consumer. South Korea's basket of goods comprises of housing costs, food, and transportation, but also a substantial segment portioned out for electronics. Based on the Consumer Price Index, South Korea's inflation is around 2.3 to 2.5%. This figure is higher than the initially projected 2%, but this could be attributed to the faltering won following the political instability caused by President Yoon Suk-yeol's attempted insurrection. This figure is projected to decrease back down to 2%, leading to potential deflation concerns. South Korea's 2024 projected Gini coefficient is 0.31, steadily dropping since 2022's 0.32. A country's Gini coefficient measures its population's income or wealth inequality. The coefficient is generally between 0 and 1, 0 representing perfect equality and 1 representing perfect inequality. Sweden has an estimated Gini coefficient of 0.25, being one of the most equal societies, and South Africa with 0.63, being one of the most unequal societies in the world. South Korea's steady reach toward income equality can be attributed to several social welfare and financial policies. Financial policies after the 1997 Asian financial crisis tied to the financial strain caused by chaebols, the expansion of social welfare programs, and minimum wage increases all have contributed to the decreasing coefficient.
the national budget increased 5 times from 2000 to 2024, reaching nearly 500 billion. However, during crises such as the 28 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, government support programs led to higher spending. This caused a large deficit of 40 billion in 28 and 8 billion in 2019. Between 2020 and 2022, expenditure reached its highest level at 500 billion, creating a record deficit of 50 billion. In 2024, our revenue is 393 billion and expenditure is 415 billion, reducing the deficit to 22 billion. This shows that our fiscal deficit grow during crisis, but improve as the economy recovers. In the early 20s, export and import were around 150 billion. By 2023, they grew steadily to 800 billion due to global economic growth. However, major events like the financial crisis, trade dispute between the US and China in 2016, and the COVID pandemic caused temporary declines. From 2021 to 2022, exports peaked at 800 billion, driven by high demand for semiconductor and tech products. By 2023, exports decreased slightly to 632 billion, while imports rose to 643 billion, resulting in a small trade deficit. This demonstrated that changes in the global economy directly affect Korean trade patterns.
So around the end of 1997 into 1998, there was a financial crisis in South Korea where multiple companies defaulted on loans, causing the stock market to crash. The result was the Korean won dropped in value by over half. And this carried through into 2000. The unemployment spiked at 7% at the end of 1998, and by 2000, it had only recovered to be about 4%. This maintained throughout the duration of the 21st century, with the next largest spike in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. Teen or youth unemployment rates largely mimicked this, with greater spikes being affected most by COVID-19 as opposed to the overall unemployment rate. The projected unemployment rate is 2.6% through the duration of the period. Employment and labor force participation. So labor force participation is the population of the country that is seeking employment, but the unemployment rate is the percentage of that population that actually is employed. Roughly 2/3 of the population were job seekers from 2000 to 2024. And of that 2/3 of the population, an additional 2/3, 66% of those seeking work were actually employed. Both of these rates were maintained fairly steady across the 2000 to 2024 time period, with the only real affecting event being COVID-19 pandemic again. There was a approximately 3% dip in 2020 due to COVID-19 in the employment rate, with a roughly 2% dip in the labor force participation. These are largely the same in the macro setting, but it does show that of those that did lose their jobs, there wasn't as great a change in those that were seeking employment. So all of our sources came from macro statistics, aggregation sites, and government websites. If there are any questions, we look forward to answering them. We thank you for your time.